जैसे श्रीनिवास ने अभी बताया, हमने कुछ वर्ष पहले महात्मा गांधी की हिंद स्वराज का संकलन किया था मूल स्रोतों से, एंड दैट टाइम वी हैड टू गो थ्रू much of what he had written before Hind Swaraj was published. And when we looked at that literature, we thought that perhaps we need to work more on it. So we systematically went through everything he wrote from almost the beginning to up to 1914, when he left South Africa for he went to England first and then returned to India. While we were reading this literature, his writings, one strong feeling we had that one theme which animates him all the time, from the youngest days up to the point we have read him, one theme which animates him is dharma. ही स्थाई भाव धर्म है, उनके सब लेखन में जो स्थाई भाव है वो धर्म है. जिस विषय पर भी विचार कर रहे हैं, किसी भी संघर्ष में लग रहे हैं, वो ये देख के चलते हैं कि इसमें धर्म क्या है, अधर्म क्या है, और धर्म मुझे किस दिशा में यहाँ से लेके जाएगा. वो ये जो उनका जो स्थाई भाव है धर्म का, this starts manifesting from very early, from his childhood. He was born in Porbandar, as we all know, and was brought up in Rajkot. This is his school in Rajkot, his primary school in Rajkot. Porbandar is a small town. Rajkot is slightly bigger. He was born in a family of Vaishyas, but it was a family of prime ministers, as his first biographer, Doak, points out very strongly, that his father was prime minister of Porbandar. His grandfather was also a prime minister of Porbandar. It was not an ordinary family in which he was born, but like most families of small towns at that time in India, like more small towns, the town and the family were suffused with sense of religion. And as Mahatma, this is the picture of Putli Bai and his mother, and the other of Karamchand Gandhi. Putli Bai and Mahatma Gandhi is greatly impressed by his mother's great austerity, great observances, great compassion for all living beings. But for all of us would have seen that compassion, that austerity, that observance, that fasting in our mothers. Perhaps in this generation it is not anymore there, but this was also the sthai bhava of the mothers of India. And he learnt his earliest sense of dharma from his mother, from his father's discussion with various groups of various religions, and as he says, he's learnt it from his maid Rambha, who taught him Ramanama. He learnt it from Ladha Maharaj, who recited Ramayana in the town. He learnt it from the Srimad Bhagavat's kathas that used to happen every year in the small towns of India. Some of it continues. Much of this religiosity of India seems to, of the small town religiosity of India, seems to be lost, and that is very unfortunate. But at the time of Mahatma Gandhi, and perhaps at the time of the younger days of most of us, this survived. And his religious sense, his sthai bhava of religion begins from there. Then at the age of 19, 20, he leaves for England. And that's also another thing that is happening to the young Indians today. They can't stay at their home anymore. They can't even stay in their country anymore. All of them have to go somewhere else to find greener pastures. While in England, what he had learnt of religion in Rajkot and Porbandar was an unconscious, natural, सहज धर्म भाव था. उन्हें उसके बारे में सोचना नहीं पड़ता था. पर इंग्लैंड पहुंचने पर he had to start becoming conscious about his religion. He had while leaving Rajkot, he had given vows to his mother that he will abstain from women, wine and flesh, and so he had to follow vegetarianism in England. But while in England, he had to explain why he is a vegetarian. Well, this is an odd thing for a Gujarati or for an Indian in general. Vegetarianism is such a natural thing, but when you go there, he had to explain to himself and to others what does it mean to be vegetarian, why somebody is a vegetarian. So that's where his religious exploration begins. He joins the Vegetarian Society, quickly becomes the secretary of Vegetarian Society of London, writes several articles in their journal, and in those articles he is telling us about the foods of ordinary Indian. His interest in India, his passion for the Indians comes through even in those early articles which he is writing he is describing how dal is made and how roti is made and how good it is, in such detail for the English in the Vegetarian Journal of the Vegetarian Society. He also comes across a couple of theosophists who make him read the Song Celestial, which is the English translation of Bhagavad Gita. But they also tell him that he should read Srimad Bhagavad Gita in Sanskrit. And that's the first time he starts reading Srimad Bhagavad Gita in Sanskrit. He is later put off by the theosophists, but he begins practicing frugal living. He walks long distances, to save on the fare in London. And he makes it a point that he'll live on less than 1 shilling 3 pence a day. That's him. He used to keep his accounts in such detail of every pence. And if he has decided that he'll live on this, he'll live on that much only. So that's where his religious explorations begin. And then he returns to India for a year or so, and then goes to South Africa in 1889, and stays there till 1914. And as soon as he reaches South Africa, I think within 2 or 3 days of his reaching Durban, he, as a barrister from England, he dares to go and sit in the court of the magistrate of Durban. And the magistrate of Durban gets him removed from there, saying that Indian headdress cannot be worn in the courts here. And the Natal Mercury gives this as a news, and the news is entitled An Unwelcome Visitor. And Mahatma Gandhi later once says that this unwelcome visitor within decades becomes a thorn in the side of the colonialists and the empire. And Mahatma Gandhi at one point says that I am determined to become a thorn in the side of the British Empire. Another event which most of us you would have heard happens, I think, within less than a month of reaching Durban. He has to go to Pretoria from Durban. And those days, travel from Durban to Pretoria used to be difficult. It was a long journey. It is, I think, otherwise also a distance of something like 600 kilometers. But the railway line was from Durban to Charlestown, which is the border of Natal. From Charlestown, you crossed over to Transvaal. Actually, there's a river there, small river they call Vaal. And so beyond the river is Transvaal. And so up to Charlestown was train, then you took a coach. It took 2 days to reach Johannesburg. And from Johannesburg, the distance of about 78 kilometers again had to be done on train up to Pretoria. And he took, again thinking that he is a barrister from London, he bought a first class ticket and sat in the compartment, first class compartment at Durban. The train had not gone even 70-80 kilometers. It reached the place called Pietermaritzburg, where the co-passengers or one of the new white passengers which entered there objected to his presence and was summarily thrown out of the coach, and his luggage was thrown behind him. Pietermaritzburg is at a certain elevation. It's kind of hill station. Our friend Mahesh Sharma ji has seen it. He spent that freezing winter night on the platform there. Then his employer, Dada Abdullah, did pulled some strings. Next day's train he took up to Charlestown. This is the Pietermaritzburg station. He reached Charlestown, and from there he was to take the coach. And the coach conductor said that you are black and we can't allow you to sit inside the coach, you must sit outside. So he agreed because he had the experience of what had happened to him in Pietermaritzburg. But that coach had not gone even 40-50 kilometers. This conductor thought that he now needs to smoke. So he came out of the coach and told Gandhiji to sit on the footboard of the coach. And Gandhiji at that point refused. He could not be dealt with in this manner, even in that situation. And because he refused, the conductor beat him up. He boxed his ears. And the beating stopped only when one of the English passengers inside the coach intervened and stopped the beating. Somehow he reached Pretoria, he will not go, but he had this kind of experience. And on reaching Pretoria, he told Indians, I don't know why you are accepting all this treatment. If I am here, I am not going to accept it. I am not going to let you accept it. This is within his reaching there in a few days. Next, sir. Next. In Pretoria, he has another experience. His employer was a Muslim. The attorneys of the employer were Christian. And both were earnest Christians, earnest Muslims. And both tried to convert him to their religion. Seeing his earnestness, they did that. And Mahatma Gandhi told them, I take your proposal, I'll accept this proposal if after studying my own religion, I find that it is not sufficient to provide me the solace that I am looking for. So he in his autobiography says that he goes through a great religious ferment in that 1893. He reads the Christian literature, he reads the Islamic literature, and he starts corresponding with Shrimad Rajachandra about the Shrimad Rajachandra suggests several texts to him, he reads to them, he engages in a long correspondence with Shrimad Rajachandra. Next slide. Shrimad Rajachandra is a very, very significant person in his life. He sees him first when he returns, the day he returns from England to Bombay, the first day. He was a Shatabdhani, the Shrimad Rajachandra, and so he was greatly impressed. And Shrimad Rajachandra was both a yogi, which photo I have put, and he was also a diamond merchant. That's how religion used to be in India. He was a diamond merchant. I put a photograph of his diamond merchant as that of a yogi. Of course, he was a Jain, but he was more of a Vaishnava. We have not honored Shrimad Rajachandra enough. Mahatma Gandhi says that we have always thought that Tolstoy is the guru of Mahatma Gandhi, but that's what we have been always taught. But Mahatma Gandhi says that with Tolstoy I had differences. If and I am not spiritual enough to deserve a guru, because for becoming having a guru, you have to reach a certain level of spiritual height. But if there is anybody who I can say is my guru, that is Srimad Rajachandra. I wish we learn more about people like him. There used to be such people in plenty in India. Everywhere, when you looked for a solace, there were people like him around. Next. Srimad Rajachandra, I have read, there's an extensive correspondence with Srimad Rajachandra, but this one phrase from Srimad Rajachandra, on a dispassionate view of the question, I am convinced that no other religion has the subtle and profound thought of Hinduism, its vision of the soul and its charity. This is what Srimad Rajachandra writes to him in one of his letters. And Mahatma Gandhi says that this pacified the ferment in me. I realized that the religion for me is the Hindu religion. I don't have to seek elsewhere. Next. And after this experience, he becomes a very erudite, very learned, very committed Hindu, very conscious Hindu. That unconscious natural Hindu of Rajkot becomes an erudite, learned Hindu and a very committed Hindu. He was so learned that he dared to give lectures on Hinduism in the Masonic Lodge in Johannesburg to the Theosophists in 1905. Those lectures are important. There are several issues which are raised in those lectures, which we'll talk about sometime. But what is important is after completing those lectures, he says that if after listening to this, any one of you has been favorably impressed and has come to feel that the Hindus or the Indians in whose country the religion expounded above prevails cannot be altogether an inferior people, I would appeal to you to let my brethren have its benefit and defend them wherever they are maligned. He was no searcher for truth or religion for himself. He was reading, had this commitment to serve his people. So if he is given 5 lectures on Hinduism, the purpose is that the listeners must start respecting his brethren of India, his co-religionists. Next, sir. Actually, Mahatma Gandhi was clear that, as he's saying, if I found myself entirely absorbed in the service of the community, the reason behind it was my desire for self-realization. I felt that God could be realized only through service, and service for me was the service of India. Now, he was a searcher after moksha. He was a sadhaka. But he was from the beginning sure that his moksha is through the service of India, through the service of land, through the service of his people. Dharampalji used to tell us repeatedly that Mahatma Gandhi wanted moksha, but he wanted moksha along with his country and along with his people. He didn't want moksha for himself alone. That was the kind of man he already was in 1905. Next. While he was going through his religious ferment, there was also a struggle, physical struggle going on in South Africa. Next slide. In 1894, when he was supposed to leave South Africa for India, he had gone there for only a year. And for almost on the eve of his departure, Natal Franchise Amendment Law was notified. And this was meant to disenfranchise Indians in Natal. They wanted to take away the right to vote from them. And the community, he explained what was happening to the community. And the community told him that we will fight with you, you must stay here. So he continues to stay there, begins the organizing the community, founds Natal Indian Congress in 1894, does various other organization activities, and starts protesting, sending protest petitions to the authorities in South Africa as well as in the mother country of England. What is important about those early petitions, and this stays with him throughout, that from day one he raises the struggle to the level of a civilizational struggle. That the petitions he is writing is extensively quoting from Mahabharata, from Ramayana, from Manusmriti, from Srimad Bhagavad, telling the authorities how civilized Indians are, and he also quotes from the Western authorities talking about India. The other important thing about his early struggle is that he makes it civilizational and he makes it the participation large scale. He is not, the first petition he sends to Lord Ripon is signed by 10,000 Indians. And it's not a simple thing to do. The first petition he sends to Lord Ripon is a petition worth reading, is signed by 10,000 Indians. And large numbers he is always able to take together. He is a great organizer. He is simply a great organizer. Of course, his franchise law is passed in 1897. His petitions fail as they were bound to. But the failure doesn't deter him. He says as time passes, the nation is being forged. Nations are not formed in a day. The formation requires years. This forging of the community continued for several years. And the struggle is not only for the object of the struggle is also for forging your nation, forging your community. That he was clear from the beginning. If you read the constitution he wrote for the Natal Indian Congress, it is not only demands on the authorities, much of it is demands on the community, that this is how you should raise your standards. Next. He takes part in Boer War, which comes in 1899. The importance of it is that we think of him as a messiah, as a paragon of non-violence. But when war comes, next you go to, he writes to, next slide. He writes to the colonial secretary that we Indians do not know how to handle arms. It is not our fault. It's perhaps our misfortune that we cannot. But it may be there are other duties no less important performed than they. He regrets not knowing how to use arms. And the Purna Swarajya declaration comes to the next, which the Acharya was talking about and my friend Srinivas was talking about. Next. There he included this, that spiritually compulsory disarmament has made us unmanly. And the presence of an alien army of occupation had made us think that we cannot look after ourselves. This is a misfortune, and this he puts it in the Purna Swarajya pledge of 1929. Next. I'll skip this. Next. Okay, next. This was the first phase of the struggle. From 1903, another phase of struggle starts. This first phase was in Natal, the second is in Transvaal, in Johannesburg. And in 1903, he starts feeling that something very bad is going to happen in Transvaal. So he shifts to Johannesburg, sets up his legal office there. He also launches the Indian Opinion, which was a mouthpiece of the community. And he sets up Phoenix settlement, which was to become, he was seeing what is going to happen. This was to become the place of solace, care, and a buvuk for the army of Satyagrahis who was to come in the future. Next. This is very important. In 1906, Zulu rebellion happens. The legendary chief Bambata rebels, and Gandhiji again offers to go to the front with this ambulance corps. The first ambulance corps had 1,200 Indians. This had even more. And he says, this time going to the war, because if I am not there, there's nobody to take care of Zulus. Next. But this Zulu rebellion is a period of reflection for him. He has many new experiences, but he starts thinking about what is it in a civilization that makes the civilized people kill others in this kind of fashion as the Zulus were being killed. Next. Next, sir. And he is mentioning here that there are these open spaces, corrals through which we are marching. And when I'm marching, I'm reflecting on the world and on the civilization and what life is in a civilized world. Next. Next, sir. This reflection of during the Zulu rebellion, that's when in the course of the rebellion, he takes the vow, he decides to become celibate. And immediately after coming back from the rebellion, he takes formally the vow of celibacy. After coming back, the day he takes the vow of celibacy, almost at that time he writes to his brother that from now on, all that I have, nothing of it is my own, all of it is for the community, so do not expect further support from me. In fact, even his wife and children cannot expect support from him any further, because he essentially takes the vow of aparigraha, of voluntary poverty. So other things, satya, ahimsa, abhaya, he had mastered earlier. Aparigraha and brahmacharya he masters after the Zulu rebellion. And with these five, these are the Yamaniyamas he expects from the Satyagrahis, which he realizes in himself by this time. He had not yet discovered Satyagraha, that's just to come. Next. Next, sir. Soon the occasion for Satyagraha, he was ready for Satyagraha. The occasion arises when the Transvaal Asiatic Law Amendment Ordinance is published in 1906. The Indian community met under the leadership of Gandhiji, decided that this Black Act was the ultimate insult offered, and they would not obey this act. And actually they take a vow on God that they will rather go to prison than accept the act. Next. So finally the Satyagraha, on this meeting that happens in Empire Theatre in September 11, this vow is taken with God as a witness that we will not submit to unjust ordinance and suffer imprisonment instead. This is called the fourth resolution of that meeting, and this came to be referred to as the Satyagraha resolution. Next. This happened in the Empire Theatre, and the occasion was so historic that gods, in order to mark the importance of the grey, this Empire Theatre was burnt that night. It was reduced to ashes. Okay. Next. This is 9/11. 1906. We are talking about several 911s. This is the 9/11, 1906 is what is relevant to India. This is what we should celebrate every time, because very major thing happened that day. Is the most historic day. I think there's much more to the Mahatma Gandhi. I should not take more time. Please come to the end. Just move on to the first Satyagraha began in July 1907. Events moved very fast. Next, sir. Next. Next. In 1908, this is a picture of the Indians burning their registration certificates in public. In fact, the papers of South Africa at that time mention this as one of the most major events that they have seen. And they are also saying, let South Africa never see this kind of day again. Okay, next. So Mahatma Gandhi is imprisoned first, then he is imprisoned again from October 14 to December 12. And this is a very difficult imprisonment when he is made to break stones in public. He is walked through the streets of Foxhurst. In Johannesburg prison, he is kept amongst hardened criminals where he is worried about being sodomized. And one of those days, he is physically lifted from the toilet seat and thrown out. That's the kind of treatment he is given. Next. His third imprisonment is even worse. There's intentional cruel treatment given to him. He is kept in solitary confinement. His neighboring cells are those of murderers and rapists. He is made to polish tattered floors and iron bars of cell. He is made to mend torn blankets hunching on the floor and refused a stool to sit on. And he is walked the streets of Pretoria in handcuffs. It was a brutal treatment. He actually comes out of hell. And somehow we don't teach all this in our schools. Next quickly. And when he comes out to it, the narration of his experience, at the end of it, he says, Alakhanam dhun lagi gagan mein, magan bhaya mandir mein raji. So when he comes out of that tapas, he seems to have realized unity with the universe and with the God. He has become a Mahatma. Next. And only that this is a Mahatma, as Pranjana Mehta says, who is engrossed with his people and his land. Pranjana says that he is seeing a Mahatma in him, but this Mahatma keeps reciting, chanting to himself, Bhalo desh maro, bhali bhom mari, mane pranitri nitya che, eja pyari. My country is good, my people are good, my land is good, and is always dearer to me than my life. Next, I'll close this. Next, sir. At this point, Dharma and Deshbhakti become, I'll just read this and then we'll go. At the end of this prison experience, he says, I wish that everyone who reads this account of experience, he writing the experiences of the prison, should cultivate patriotism. If he does not have it, and learn Satyagraha therefrom, and if he has patriotism already, be more firm in it. I'm growing more convinced every day that no one who does not know his religion can have true patriotism in him. I think this is a good point to close. I'll close at this point. One reason we have written this book is let us learn patriotism, which somehow we are not teaching in our schools, not teaching our people. And as Mahatma Gandhi says, no patriotism is possible without religion. All patriotism is derived from religion, as he is saying. So we have to learn to be patriotic, we have to learn to be religious. And as he is saying, patriotism which arises from religion cannot be exclusive. जो कांची आचार्य ने हमें बताया, महात्मा लोग संकुचित नहीं होते, धर्म संकुचित नहीं होता, धर्म संकुचित नहीं करता, धर्म से जो देशभक्ति निकलती है वो पूर्ण विश्व को अपने साथ लेके चलती है. वैसे देशभक्त, वैसे धार्मिक जीव हम बने, इस आशा के साथ नमस्कार.
बोले पर धन नव झाले हाथ रे मोह माया व्याप नहीं जैन दृढ़ वैराग्य जना मन सकल तीरथ ते न तन मरे वर्ण लोभी ने कपट रहित से काम को धनिवाया रे भने नरसयो तेनु दर्शन करता कुले को तेरे ताया रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई